What if I told you that your brain is constantly lying to you, and you don't even notice? That within the first few seconds of meeting someone, you've already decided what kind of person they are. Smart or foolish, kind or cold, trustworthy or suspicious. And even if you later learn the truth, that first impression still lingers, quietly shaping how you see them forever. This invisible bias has a name, the halo effect. Imagine this. You're walking into a job interview. The person waiting for you in the lobby is sharply dressed, confident, smiling. You assume they're the interviewer, probably intelligent, successful, maybe even kind. But moments later, you find out they're just another candidate. You're surprised, but your mind had already built a whole story around their appearance. That's the halo effect at work. One single trait, like confidence or attractiveness, casts a halo over everything else we perceive about that person. The reverse is also true. Think about the last time someone rubbed you the wrong way. Maybe they were a little late or seemed distracted when you first met. Before you knew it, you were assuming all sorts of things, that they're careless, lazy, maybe even disrespectful. But what if they just had a tough morning? Our brains don't wait for evidence. They fill in the blanks instantly. And that's both fascinating and dangerous. Psychologists first noticed this in the early 1900s when they studied how soldiers were rated by their officers. One officer might give a soldier high marks for leadership, intelligence, and character, all based on how physically fit or confident that soldier appeared. The officers weren't consciously biased, they were human. One positive impression had spilled over, influencing every other judgment. The same happens everywhere. Schools, offices, friendships, and even dating. Here's something unsettling. Studies show that people who are conventionally attractive are more likely to be seen as intelligent, honest, and capable, even when there's no proof. A teacher might assume a good-looking student is smarter. A judge might give a lighter sentence. A hiring manager might prefer a candidate with a pleasant smile. These are not deliberate acts of discrimination. They're shortcuts, mental patterns our brains use to make sense of limited information. But why does the brain do this? It's all about efficiency. Our minds are like prediction machines, constantly trying to make quick decisions in a complex world. Every second, your senses flood you with information. You can't consciously analyze everything, so your brain relies on patterns, on heuristics, on fast associations. The halo effect is one of those shortcuts. It saves time, but it also hides the truth. Picture this. You meet someone at a party who's incredibly charming. They make eye contact, laugh at your jokes, and remember your name. Instantly, you feel connected. You assume they're genuine, thoughtful, maybe even kind-hearted. But charm is not the same as character. A few weeks later, you discover they gossip, twist stories, and only show kindness when it benefits them. Yet, part of you still resists seeing them negatively because that initial halo hasn't faded. It's as if your first impression carved a permanent groove in your mind. Now, here's the twist. The halo effect doesn't just apply to people, it shapes how we see everything. Brands, ideas, even memories. When you buy a product from a company you love, you might forgive its flaws. When a celebrity endorses something, it feels more trustworthy. When you read a quote from someone you admire, you accept it without questioning. That's the halo effect, turning perception into persuasion. And it's not just positive halos. There's an opposite force too, the horn effect. One bad trait, one mistake, one awkward moment can taint everything else about someone. Imagine meeting someone who's quiet in a group setting. You might assume they're unfriendly. Or if someone makes one careless comment, you might label them rude forever. You see how unfair that is? We're all both angels and devils in other people's minds, depending on which moment they caught us in. Let me ask you something. Have you ever misjudged someone, only to realize later you were completely wrong? Maybe a classmate you thought was arrogant turned out to be shy. Maybe a colleague you found cold was simply focused. Those moments sting because they reveal how easily our perceptions betray us. The brain doesn't like uncertainty, so it fills in the gaps with stories that feel right, but aren't necessarily true. Here's a fascinating experiment. In 1920, psychologist Edward Thorndike asked commanding officers to rate their soldiers on several qualities: leadership, appearance, intelligence, loyalty. He discovered that if a soldier scored high on one trait, like appearance, they tended to score high on all the others, regardless of reality. That pattern repeats across decades. In modern studies, hiring managers tend to assume people with deeper voices are more competent leaders. People wearing glasses are often seen as smarter. And people who smile more are judged as more trustworthy, even though smiles can easily be faked. So what can we do about it? The first step is awareness. When you catch yourself making instant judgments, pause. Ask yourself, am I evaluating the person or just reacting to how they made me feel? Our emotions are powerful filters. If someone makes us feel comfortable, we assume they're good. If they make us uneasy, we assume they're not. But feelings are not facts. Here's a practical example. Suppose you're interviewing someone for a job. They walk in confidently, dressed sharply, speaking smoothly. It's tempting to decide right then they're perfect for the role. But before you finalize that thought, imagine them in a different outfit on a different day. Would they still seem as capable? Or are you being influenced by the halo of confidence? Slowing down that instinctive rush to judgment can save you from a lot of errors, not just in hiring, but in relationships and daily interactions too. Another simple way to break free from the halo effect is to separate your judgments. Rate one quality at a time. Don't let one good or bad trait color everything else. For example, you might admire someone's work ethic but disagree with their methods. Both can be true. People are not all good or all bad. They're a mosaic of traits, some admirable, some flawed, all human. But here's the deeper truth. The halo effect doesn't just distort how we see others, it shapes how we see ourselves. When you believe others see you in a certain way, you start living up to it. If someone once called you the smart one, you might feel pressure to always be right. If someone labeled you lazy, that identity might quietly follow you, even if you've changed. The halos others place on us can become self-fulfilling prophecies. Here's a paradox. The more self-aware you become, the less power the halo effect has over you. When you realize your judgments are just shortcuts, you start to question them. You start to see people, not projections. That's when real understanding begins. But most people never reach that point because they cling to their first impressions as if they were truths written in stone. Why? Because changing your mind feels uncomfortable. It threatens your sense of certainty. And humans crave certainty even more than truth. So how do we become less deceived by first impressions? Start small. The next time you meet someone, resist labeling them. Observe instead of judging. Notice their behavior over time rather than summarizing them with one word. Try saying to yourself, maybe they're just having a bad day. This single sentence can soften your perception and open space for empathy. Because empathy is the antidote to the halo effect. It reminds us that people are complex, not caricatures. Now, here's the hidden twist. The halo effect isn't entirely bad. In fact, it can be a tool. You can use it consciously to your advantage, but ethically. When you present yourself with warmth, respect, and consistency, people's positive first impressions can help build trust faster. The key is not manipulation, but mindfulness. If you know that small details create big perceptions, you can align your behavior with your intentions. Your tone, your posture, even your energy, they all speak before your words do. But the moment you start using this knowledge to deceive, it backfires. Because while the halo effect can open doors, the truth always walks through them eventually. Authenticity sustains what charm begins. False halo fades. A genuine one glows brighter over time. Let's bring this back to something personal. Think of someone you misjudged, someone who turned out to be completely different from your first impression. Remember how that realization felt? That's your reminder that perception is not reality. It's just your brain's best guess at the moment. And if your brain can be wrong about others, it can be wrong about you too. Maybe you've been underestimating yourself because of someone else's halo or their lack of one. So the next time you catch yourself saying, they seem like a good person, or I just don't like their vibe. Pause for a second. Ask yourself, is this my intuition or my illusion? Because between those two lies the truth about human perception. In the end, the halo effect teaches us a humbling lesson. People are mirrors of our own expectations. When we look at others through halos and horns, we're really seeing fragments of ourselves, our biases, fears, and desires. Real wisdom begins when you start looking past the glow and into the substance. Because sometimes the person who seems least impressive in the beginning turns out to be the one who changes your life. And sometimes the person who shines the brightest hides the darkest shadows. That's not cynicism, it's perspective. So be curious, be kind, and give people the grace of time before deciding who they are. Because beneath every halo, there's a human being, just as beautifully complicated as you. If you found this eye-opening, subscribe for more calm, insightful tales of the mind. In the next video, we'll explore the psychology of why people pretend to be someone they're not, and what that reveals about us all.